Great. So we're going to kick off. Welcome everyone to another iCabbi Innovate webinar session. My name is Kevin French. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for the Americas, and this is a session that we put together for the recent Canadian event that we had in Toronto. So this session is a little bit different than the other ones, which are heavily technology focused. This is focused more on helping you folks with RFPs, obtaining new business, and some hints on how iCabbi can both help you and also how AI is coming into the generation of these types of things. I really don't like presenting when I can't see everybody's faces or get questions and things. So as we go through this, if you have a question, Sarah Ryan is helping me out today. Please click the button to raise your hand at any time, and Sarah will unmute you and you can ask your question. And please interrupt me at any point to ask the question. As Sinead likes to say, probably if you're going to ask a question, there's probably multiple other people who will want to ask the same similar question. So I'm going to kick into this. So essentially, let's go to the next slide, hopefully. There we go. So what we're going to go through is really a methodology for going out, finding these corporate RFPs or government RFPs or business type RFPs that go out there. This is something that was not done that frequently in the past within our industry, but as everybody knows, with all of the changes with the TNC companies coming along, there's a lot more competition for the retail work. So a lot of our customers have shifted their focus onto this corporate type work, which is somewhat more complicated to execute, but it's also very safe from some of the what the TNCs want to do. If it's complicated or one-ofs, they don't want to do it. But what we have found, and we showed some statistics in another session that we had at the Innovate event, where a lot of our customers are now doing kind of the same level of work, but they are actually the value of each individual trip is much higher than what it used to be. So the overall amount of revenue that's being put through is higher, but it's the same number of trips. And the nice part about it is once you win these contracts, it's much more dependable. This work is going to come in and you're going to have this work for several years, which is great. So let me just kick in. I'm going to just define a couple of terms here. I'm sure most of you know what these terms are, but just to make sure everybody's on side. So typically you're going to hear three different phrases: RFI, RFP, RFQ. And you really need to develop a strategy for all of them. RFI, which is request for information, is often, I'll give you an example. City of Toronto, within the last couple of years, put out an RFI on soft meters. And it was soft meters, but they actually had a request for information on incident management, more insurance type things associated with it. And the reason why I say you have to have a strategy for it is because essentially they're out fishing for information. So you need to be conscious that whatever information you send back on an RFI, not only the city or whomever is putting out that RFI, other people are going to see essentially your responses. So you've got to be a little bit careful on RFIs. The positive side is you can influence them because typically they're going to very quickly put out an RFP based on the information they get from the RFI, but you're somewhat showing your cards when you respond to the RFI to try and influence the RFP. The RFP is really the central one. This is essentially a request for bids for a specific set of requirements that you're going to price, and essentially they're going to pick a winner and award the work. RFQ, ourselves and our customers have you kind of run into this a little less frequently. And what RFQ is, they don't want you to essentially propose what you're going to do. They essentially are just looking for a price for a service. So I would say the top two are much more common than the third, but it does happen. Uh, so to give you an idea, this is, just move my zoom around here. This is essentially a rough idea of, transportation RFPs in Canada. This is $3 to $5 billion of work is given out this way. This is a mix. This is everything on this slide on the Canadian side. But the interesting part is 25 to 40% of that work is given out on RFPs, and that is growing every year. Where essentially the governments, the cities, the provinces, the country, national level, they essentially need to give this out in an RFP process to prove that it's open and fair and can be monitored. So it is something you need to look at. These are big numbers, but when you boil that down to just travel or transportation in taxis and limos, is still a large portion of that number. And I think here at the bottom, yeah, we've got even just the Greater Toronto Area, GTA, is almost 300 million annually in work that is bid out through RFPs and contracts. So it's something that you should be interested in. And next, I'll show you one that is going to illustrate it. So essentially, Canadian government has a $250 million fund over 5 years to solve rural transit problems. Now, I know some people hear that and you just think of buses and things like that, but a lot of these programs don't operate you're not going to put a city transit bus out doing a rural run. It just doesn't make sense. So a lot of these things are done through our customers or taxi companies or smaller shuttle companies. And I'm actually going to show you an example of one in a little bit. But when we did this at the Innovate event in Toronto, we actually had some customers who were working on accessing this fund. And again, when you're looking at some of these programs, it's not a big volume situation. But essentially, the government, in many instances, has to go out and make sure that these folks have access to proper transportation. So it's more of a quality versus quantity thing. And again, the sample RFP I'm going to show you in a little bit is something like 4 or 5 vehicles transporting I believe it's nurses to a specific location to make sure that they can provide health care in this case. And it's a multi-$100,000 a year contract with a handful of vehicles. So you need to keep this in mind, and you need to think about this not from a historic, oh, we want 1,000 trips a day, $1,020 trips a day versus, okay, maybe I'm much more happy taking 50 $300 trips a day. So it's that type of equation that comes into things. We hear this a lot, and quite frankly, we have said some of these things as well. Some people look at the RFP process, what you have to do, what we need to comply, and there's a million excuses why not to do it. We're too, you can read what's on the screen. We're too small. This is only for large companies to chase. We don't have the people. It's not worth the time. I don't want to put a bunch of effort into this. I'm already too busy. You know, I don't understand it, or fill in whatever reason that you don't want to do it. It's easy to not do it. But what I'm going to show you is, you know, using the AI tool sets that are available now, it is much easier to essentially go after this work. And in a lot of instances, outside of the main cities, whoever's putting out this RFP really doesn't have much choice in who can actually potentially do these programs. And, you know, my advice would be, even if you're a smaller company, you can go out and win this work. Here's the next. There we go. So this is essentially the process that we follow when we're going through um, this exercise. And I'm not going to go through each of the items on the chart, but I'm going to go through the first couple, and then I'm going to go through kind of the end. And you know, the reason that it's shown in a circle here is because every time you go through and bid on one of these projects, there's a large opportunity to take learning from those projects and build it into your next bid response. So it's a very cyclical thing. Even iCabbi, the projects that we bid on, if you go back and look at a bid you put in a year ago, you shake your head and go, this was really not great. But the learnings from doing this over and over again can essentially make you go faster and make your responses incredibly strong. So I'm going to go through the first three as an example, and I'm going to show you a little bit more towards number seven, result and learn. And by the way, I think, Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, but we'll record this session and we can also send out these slides to you as well as a package if you want to take a look at some of the details I'm about to go through. Next. So the find is pretty simple these days. You can essentially you can sign up to essentially RFP search programs like Merck's Bid and Go in Canada. If you're a TTA member, I believe the TTA has a piece of their website now that is showing transportation RFPs. But you can also either use AI or Google Alerts to essentially use some of these search words in your local area for any RFPs or tenders that are coming out. The tricky part is finding the search words, because, you know, if you're a taxi company, it may not be described as, hey, we're looking for a taxi provider. Need to be a little bit more generic in your search terms. The other piece as well is, and I know a lot of our customers do this anyways, is make sure that you're tied into your local service area, whatever cities are in your service area, to look for any work that they are putting out. Um, it is much easier. And again, use the Google Alerts. You can do this for free. You don't need to go out and pay money to these national engines to do the searches for you. Google AdWords, you can go into AI and run scheduled tasks to do these searches. And I would recommend starting with that until you get a very good idea of you know, am I finding these? You know, or did the city just give out an award to an RFP which I didn't even know about? That would be concerning. Then you really need to figure out why you're not tied into those types of things. So pretty simple. What I'm going to show you now is, once it goes next. So here's what I'm going to do now is go through an example of a very automated way to do this to take away some of the intimidation. And again, I'll just stop for a second. Any questions? Uh, we have anybody with any questions, Sarah, just to check before I go into this?
Nothing at the moment.
Okay, perfect. I put everybody to sleep already. Awesome. So what I'm going to show you, and this is really the evaluation stage. So this is, I'm going to bring this up. Just put this full screen so it's easy to see here. So this is, there we go. So this is actually an RFP that came out west in Canada. I'm not going to read through it, but you can see it's a 65. I'll just go right to the end. There we go. It's a 65 page RFP. Like I mentioned earlier, it's about transporting. I'll just go through it really quick. And again, if this came into your email or you were going through the find process for the RFPs, this is going to come into your inbox. And at least I know I would. The first thing I'm going to go is, oh, I don't want to read this 65 pages to find out what this thing is. You can look at the summary very quickly, but everybody's going to look at this and go, oh, go and read this. And what is a little bit worrisome for any company, if this came in and you were somewhat interested in it because potentially this is in your service area, you might have to give this to your financial, legal people, your operational people, your driver services people, and you got multiple people reading this 65-page document, which quite frankly is going to chew up resources, which goes back to the excuses. So go back over here. But here's where you can use AI to really, really help yourselves out. And it's my opinion that this process will also help you get better and better and better at this and essentially pick out the dangerous things that are concerning to you. So what I'm going to do is show you an example. So this is put together essentially a very generic, and again, I'll use the term prompting. Whenever people hear AI, you'll hear you need to be able to learn how to do prompting and things. It's not complicated. Here's a very easy example. So this is something I put together in a couple hours. So essentially what I've done is created this to say, look, I'm responding to an RFP. I don't want to read this 65-page document, but here are the things that as a transportation company are important to me. And I'm going to show you how this works. So, I want an executive summary, you know, and again, as companies, you need to go out and start creating this very simple file and questions on things that are important to you. Like, I think this would be common to everybody. Are there penalties if I do this and do and have problems? Is it going to be an issue? Is there bid bonds? Is there special vehicle types? Is there special driver qualifications? Everybody's favorite, what the heck are the insurance requirements? And what's the opportunity? So, and I'm going to give you a little hint on it. And if you ever try and do this type of thing or use AI to help you in preparing or generating these, this line right here will save you a lot of time. So when you're asking the AI to research and put together things for you, what is really important is, this line is basically saying, read the 65-page RFP and go through it and generate essentially a budget for me that I can look at. The important part is the AI, and I'll talk about this a little bit later on, sometimes it guesses. So what I would suggest is anywhere where you're asking it to evaluate anything, ask it and tell it to create a link of where it's getting the information, where it's making the decision. So then when you're reviewing it, we'll see in a little bit, you can go and look at the link and go, okay, this is legitimate or it's completely wrong. Again, I won't go through all these, but all the standard things that you would look at, is certifications, payment terms. Hey, am I going to get paid for no-shows, cancellations? Geez, how much administration time is this going to take? So, by the way, estimate my administration time and cost it at $80 an hour. Again, you can put whatever you want here. You can put whatever questions you want here as well to go through and do this. How is this RFP going to be scored, evaluated? Is there SLAs? Um, this is a big one that we're finding on RFPs, which is, if I do this project, where can my call center be? Hey, maybe my call center is not in Canada, US, maybe it's somewhere else. Is this going to be an issue? And give me a schedule. When's this due? When's the questions due? What are the time frames on? And again, just some formatting things for the AI. So very simple. But I would suggest this is something, keep it centralized, keep adding to it, keep putting your questions in here. So as soon as you get one of these RFPs, you can essentially do it. One other quick tip is when you're doing this, whatever AI you're using, Claude, ChatGPT, whatever the next one is, all of them essentially have an ability to create, you'll see a section in them called projects. I would not do this type of work in just a straight up chat. Create a project for the opportunity. And you'll see in a second, you can load only the files associated with this into that project. Then it essentially makes the AI focus on just the files that you're talking about within that time. So the biggest part, and this is the evaluate piece. So I'm going to run this very quickly. So I'll stop here. So what you'll see is I'm using ChatGPT for this. What it's doing, just let it run a little bit. Yeah. So essentially it's loaded the RFP in, that's that 65-page RFP. The evaluation questions is over. The evaluation questions were the text files I just showed you. And what you'll see is essentially, I'm just going to tell it, take my evaluation questions from the file and run them exactly. So it's now going through all of those instructions and questions that's in the evaluation file and creating a review of that RFP. And I'm not going to run this whole thing through, but what's interesting is what you'll see up here is you'll see where the AI is going out and gathering some of this information. So you can see this RFP is in Manitoba. So you see it going out to the local area. It's going out to anything it can pull up on rates, taxi regulations, fee schedules that are public over the internet or that the AI has access to. So just in the interest of time, yeah, this is so to give you an idea, it's going to take that 65-page RFP, all of those questions that I put in there, and essentially I think it's 2 minutes, and you'll see it's doing the rates, but I'm going to jump ahead. So it takes 2 minutes to generate answers to those questions from that 65-page document. So here's what I'm going to do. to make it easy, here's a copy of all of the responses. So again, I didn't even read the 65-page RFP, but within 2 minutes after creating that format of how to essentially look at the RFP, what's important to me as a transportation company, I've got a very simple paragraph on what the service is. It's passenger transport between two health facilities. It's 3 years. It's got two additional 1 year options. And like I said before, this is 4 scheduled return trips a week plus some unscheduled. So it's not a big volume business. Like you're not going to get hundreds of trips, but as you go through this, you can see, is there penalties? Yeah, but not trip type penalties, no bonds, special vehicle types. Oh, it needs an SUV or a van. Um, does it require special driver qualifications? Class 4 license or higher. I'm not sure that's that special in Manitoba. What are the insurance? So it takes you through exactly what insurance is required. But here's where I mentioned earlier, when you ask the AI to do anything, tell it to give you where it is pulling that from. So like I said up above, this is a few jobs a week. It's a very long trip. So literally, it's telling me based on everything I've asked it to do, this could be 162,000 per year contract to do this work. Takes you through how it's calculated, and like I said, tell it to give you where it's pulling this. And so, just to show you, it's pulled these rates from City of Thompson. Good to know. It's garbage and recycling day. And it is pulled how it's done the estimates um, from this local fee schedule. So if you look down here, it's got, here you go, good old flag drop and the per mile and the waiting time. So, pretty legitimate location where it has pulled those estimates. So, again, do you want to mark this up? Do you want to put down? No. Again, is there standards required? What are the payment terms? Am I getting paid for no-shows or cancellations? Doesn't mention it. Here's essentially where I spoke before, you know, estimate the management time for this at the $80 an hour. So it's saying, this is going to take a couple hours a week and price it out. Here's how it is scored and evaluated. Is there an SLA? No. Um, do I have to have the call center locally? It says, it doesn't say. Um, just tells you what it is quoting. Another thing that has helped me in doing this type of work is when you are having AI summarize an RFP or an opportunity like this, you can also tell it to also give you the exact quote or line from the RFP it's referencing to make sure that it's keeping things properly. And here's the schedule for this opportunity. Interestingly, and this is where I would really, you know, ask people to use kind of their smarts and what's important to their business. I often like to think about these things graphically. I don't know in Manitoba where this service is running. So essentially, what he did was um, asked the AI, "Hey, draw me a map of what this service area looks like. Like I want to, I think graphically, I want to see what this looks like." And again, less than a minute, go down to the end here. Let's just stop this. You can just make this a bit bigger. There we go. So I didn't tell it anything. I just said, draw me a map of the service area, different routes. to understand what this service looks like. So, very quickly, I can go, okay, it's going from Thompson, Manitoba out to this remote nursing station. It's a 140-kilometer trip each way, which is obviously the big impact on what the pricing of this would be. But it very quickly gives me a really good idea of how this is going to operate. And again, the AI is getting better and better at producing whatever you need to do it. And that could be built into your first one. The one thing that, before we go on to the prepare stage, the one thing that I would say is the other thing that people have asked us about is, um, oh, I don't comply to the RFP. Don't get over concerned. A lot of the governments, they copy the RFPs from other projects. And we've often heard like, well, the insurance is impossible. Don't be, I would say don't be concerned or don't be afraid to bid on things and say, look, you have asked for this insurance. It's technically not even possible. Here is what's possible because they will adjust it. The other thing I would also recommend is as you go through the question process again is very strategic. You don't want to ask things because every question and answer is published to everybody who is bidding. So it is a very good way to find out what essentially your competition is concerned about or looking for. And I would advise that you watch those questions very closely. Um, Again, the big piece of work in this is often, okay, I've evaluated, I want to bid on it. Um, okay, now I have to prepare this. Um, what I would recommend, everybody has websites. Everybody doesn't update their websites that quickly, but essentially as I mentioned before, is you start responding to these, you need to start keeping like the little text file I showed before. You need to keep descriptions of what makes you unique as a transportation company, whether it's a long history, whether it's certain vehicle types or driver types, or essentially other reference work. If you build up these libraries of information and load them into the AI as essentially a knowledge base on how to respond, the draft responses will get better and better and better. Um, the people putting out RFPs are also really smart now. They control the response structure. And what used to be simple, people used to just put a link to their website or put a link to a document. Almost every single RFP response now will not click a link in your response. Like it'll literally say, if you put a link in your response, we will not use it, which means it can't be updated. It needs to be very specific, often put into almost spreadsheet type textual responses. So it's something, it was an easy way out before where it's like, tell us about your company. And people would put a link to the about on their web page, which doesn't work anymore. So what I'm going to show you is how AI can help you on this side. So let's get this up. And again, any comments or anything yet, Sarah?
Nothing at the moment.
Okay, so I'm going to show you how easy it is to create a draft response. So I'm not sure anybody from Duffy's Taxi or one of our Manitoba customers is on, but essentially I'm pretending to be Duffy's Taxi, and all I'm telling the AI is that it has the information I've shown you already. But what I'm doing is saying, take all of the information from duffystaxi.com to respond to this RFP. I use iCabbi as my technology solution. So use iCabbi.com for my technology solution. Use, standard taxi rates for the quote and make essentially a draft response to this RFP based on whatever format that 65-page RFP created. Again, I'm not going to go through this, but you can see. So this was 6.5 minutes to be able to generate a draft RFP. So it's going to go through. It does the same thing. It goes out and looks at Duffy's website. It looks at iCabbi's website. It looks at the rate structures. Um, just skip ahead for interest in time here. And in 6.5 minutes, it created this proposal response from just the two websites and public information. And I'm not going to read through this entire thing, but essentially it gives you a checklist of, okay, this is, here's the executive summary. Not going to read all of this, but it tells you where it's pulled the information, but it also tells you, look, hey, we don't have access to your insurance certificates or, your license as a company. But again, those are things that you could have loaded into the AI and it would have populated all of the information. So I won't go through all this, but it's essentially created, here's the approach, here's the plan, here's our vehicles, here's our driver plan, maintenance and safety, whatever that RFP response had asked for, financial offer, all of the pricing. It's created a pretty good format for you to start with to basically respond to that RFP in 6 minutes. So again, if you take and have these prepared, an RFP could come in and you could see if you qualify for it, do a draft response, probably in less than a half hour. To do that manually before this, we're talking weeks of work, easily. So get it to do it. The other thing that I always like to do is, okay, if we're going to bid on this, who do we have to beat? And so again, I don't know anything about transportation in Manitoba or who did this. You can see the question. So again, just asked AI, who's the incumbent for this project now? And it literally went out and said, hey, we think it's NCN Thompson Bus Limited. Here's where it was awarded. So you again could go and look at that competitor to see, look at that competitor probably to adjust your pricing to make sure that you got a shot at this. But very, very simple. You don't need a spy agency to go out and find this. If it is accessible to AI to be able to see these things, it's going to find it. And I would also say AI seems to have much better access than if you're out Googling things, because it can somehow find documents that you often need to be able to log in to access, and it can pull into this type of work. So the final piece again here, again, go back to that 7 step chart. One of the most powerful things that you can do is, hopefully you win. It's great. Everybody likes to always win these. I put the effort in. I want to win it. I want to boost up my business. But I would also suggest that there are some things that you really need to do if you didn't win. As a matter of fact, I know people who do this process whether they win or lose. And what this is I don't know if anybody has ever heard, I'm sure if you've watched any sort of movie that involves journalists, you'll hear them always filing freedom of information requests. So pretty much every government contract award, city, state, province, you name it, you can essentially go in and make a freedom of information request to get what people bid, to get their responses. And this is also something when you're putting in your response, you have to be conscious of this because you can mark sections of your response confidential. But if you put too much of your response confidential, they will probably not even consider it because they don't find that that's practical. So what I'm going to show you, and again, this is a tricky process. It's arduous. You've got to stand on your left foot, hold your right ear, and go through the steps to do it. But the power of it is incredible. So what I'm going to show you is I found two publicly accessible bid responses for an RFP in the US. I think it was in Chicago potentially. So what it was Uber bid on it. This other company called SP Plus bid on it. And again, responses aren't always public, but if you go through the freedom of information process, you can do it. So essentially, what I'm doing here is saying, take these two RFP responses, and again, one of the responses could have been your responses, but essentially what I'm doing is saying, go through these responses and tell me, what improvements I should make on the wording or sections, and how should this be done? So again, I'm going to show you the result in the interest of time here. But it literally takes those two responses. And again, these are 100-page documents here. So I'm going to show you it's going through here, and I'm going to jump to what it recommends. Again, on timing, whoops, it took a minute to do this analysis, but this is the type of thing that you can get out of it. So it literally goes through and tells you, the SP Plus company, essentially its response was much more quantitative because they have been doing transportation for a long time. They're quoting a lot of real numbers. Uber's is talking more about the platform. It tells you what it believes was strong or weak against each. And then it basically gives you some lessons. Like, for example, I really like this one. Instead of saying, we offer a dashboard with reporting and controls, word it like this, because if somebody is going through and scoring your response, this is much more likely to get you points than just a generic, we have a dashboard. So again, it goes through multiple suggestions on essentially how you should word your response to essentially attract points from the people doing the scoring. And I think the other thing that's important here is often people who are doing the scoring, you're the experts in the transportation. They're not. So something that is very normal to you may be very foreign to them. So even these little wording suggestions and things that it goes through as you do this learning process is going to make your responses much better. So very worthwhile doing. And again, if you put a large effort into an RFP response, do the freedom of information piece, and again, compare your own response against essentially what other people bid to improve your process as you go through this. Now, a little word of warning, and then we'll get to questions. Um, uh, don't always trust the AI. Um, I think that the term most people use for it is it hallucinates sometimes. It's very difficult. It will lie to you. You need to go through and validate and check everything it produces for you. Like I mentioned a little bit earlier, ask it to give you the references to where it is pulling key information to make some of those decisions. You need to validate it. You can see some goofy examples here on the side, but it will come back with some just crazy stuff sometimes. Uh, so you do need to check it. Um, and before we go into questions, going to offer up some help and some explanation. So we've been asked, why is iCabbi concentrating or spending more time looking into RFPs and this type of business? And I think the first thing I would say is we got very concerned when we started seeing companies outside the industry, being yourselves or iCabbi, coming in and winning these projects and taking that revenue and those margins outside of your operating revenue and our operating revenue. So people, I'll call them middlemen, are coming in, winning these contracts, and then essentially handing off the work to the taxi companies, the black car companies, while keeping a good chunk of the margin. So we want to see these projects come into essentially our customers' operating models. Um, we don't want to see it go outside the industry. Um, we have no intention of competing with our partners sorry, with our customers. So what you will see is we're out monitoring these. We've already done this many, many, many times. If we see an RFP that is within your operating area, we will make sure that you know about it. The first question we're going to ask you is, are you going to bid on it? Because if one of our customers is bidding on one of these projects, we will not bid on it. We will help. We will help. We're very willing to help because at the end of the day, like this bottom right piece, if you expand your business, it's always good for iCabbi. So again, we don't want to compete with any of our customers. It's completely aimed at helping you win this business. We've got essentially some answers and some wording and some capabilities to help you do this. And we also see what's happening more and more now is kind of this fourth bubble is many of our customers who would traditionally compete against each other on some of these projects are now working together, um, which we think is great. We've seen people win large school contracts with that methodology, where before they used to just essentially try and outbid each other and cut the margin out of it. And they, eventually said, this is crazy. Let's just work together on this and get a reasonable price out of it. And the other thing I would mention here is a lot of the cities who we speak to frequently, or airports or whomever, one of the reasons, and I'm not making this up. They have literally told us they like speaking to the TNCs because there's only two. So if they have a transportation project, they don't want to get a bid from 15 taxi companies. They would much more prefer to deal with a smaller group. So this is also something that is coming into these bids. And the other thing that you do need to think about is, they often call for partnerships now. So these third-party companies are coming in. They may send you some work. They may send Uber, Lyft, the city's vehicles work. So they're looking for conglomerates here. I believe, before I hit the last one, do we have any questions? I would open it up to any questions or thoughts or comments that anybody has.
I can't see any questions just yet there, Kevin, but do you want me to launch some polls? Give people.
Yes, please.
Yep.
So, yeah, Sarah's reminding me I completely forgot. So we'll put up a poll that, um, we kind of like to know how many people are out uh, bidding on RFPs or projects like this. While people respond to this, when we had our in-person meeting, there was 35 fleets, and I would guess 30 of the fleets out of the 35 were actively doing this type of thing. So we did see, some large interest in doing this. And yeah, essentially so far, nobody has responded that they're not looking at this type of thing. Um, so we're going to close that one out, Sarah. Yeah, it's 100%. Everybody essentially is out looking for that type of work. And I would, while we wait for the rest of the answers to come in, I would say if anybody wants a copy of what I just went through to use as examples to build out their own stuff, just let us know. We will send it out to you. If anybody wants help or suggestions on responding to this type of stuff, let us know. The second question here, which again, fill it in here or send it in, on kind of the webinar survey that will go out. Let us know how we can support you with this type of thing. It's important. Like the example we put in here, they don't have to be big volume RFPs without being, decent revenue opportunities. We know a lot of the customers, I forget the account, but we know a lot of our customers deal with this moving rail crews around. And again, they're not big volume contracts, but the value per trip is, several $100s per trip. And there's a lot of work out there that is similar to that. Great. So we'll let people answer that one in. Will we email out a survey, Sarah?
I can do. Yep. I'll email out a survey afterwards to the attendees.
Yeah, I think that'll be easier. We'll email that out. Let us know how we can help you out. Really appreciate people come out to these webinars. We took a break from doing them, but we're putting a lot more time into doing these in person, repeating them online, so folks can see what's going on and give us feedback on these. And I believe our next one, go to the next slide. Here's our next slide. So the next webinar coming up is essentially by Flip on voice AI. This is something we've had like tremendous feedback from people who have put that technology live. Similar to the AI showed you here, it tends to improve and increase uh, almost weekly in what it can do. So I'd really suggest signing up to that one. If you missed CBT's previous webinar, one of the things that you will be able to put together on that, especially with the voice AI, is CBT would have talked about what we call the rules engine. And while the rules engine is impressive on its own, it's also part of ODSP if we have Ontario people. The rules engine is literally going to be able to take all of those free-form notes that people put in accounts on, special instructions for your operators to be able to take that work. The voice AI technology will be able to start accessing those rules so that they can automate more of the account work. So I would really suggest signing up for that. And I think we got 3 minutes. Just check the chat. Anything in the chat or anywhere else, Sarah, I need to answer?
No, not at the moment.
Perfect. So again, I think most people have my details. If you need any help or thoughts or suggestions, reach out to me as well. And again, thank you so much for coming out, and we look forward to getting feedback on this. And also, please sign up for Levi's session on the 27th. Thank you all.